St. Martin included an agricultural industry, again, across most of the Caribbean, even though it's gradually continues to decline. So these are all assets, if you would, across the region. Continuing, Caribbean context, you cannot ignore our proximity to North America, to the USA in particular, and South America. That's one of the biggest things, issues why the US government is interested in most of the Caribbean regions, because they're viewed as potential transit points for all kinds of things, money, drugs, finance, and so on. And so the US's concern about security and anti-terrorism has made the Caribbean of interest, and therefore it puts a lot of US interests and imperatives. They are now important to the Caribbean region. Money laundering, another huge interest of the United States, and they are interested to know that the Caribbean is not involved in any activities which compromises their economy. And drug trafficking. The US has an ongoing war on drugs, as they call it, which is largely interested in stopping the transit of drugs from Central and South America into the United States via transshipment points in the Caribbean. And I mean, most of us would be familiar with all of this, and those things have caused the US government to enact cybercrime and counterterrorism and cyberterrorism measures and so on, which they are increasingly pulling Caribbean nations, Caribbean governments in. The OAS, specifically since 2003, has been working on a set of programs for, let me see if I can, CICTE, that's Inter-American Committee on Anti-Terrorism, which is an organization that was set up by the OAS to look at creating an Inter-American SIRT, Watch and Warning Network. And in fact, the exercise that we're going to do a little later came out of one of the OAS meetings last year in November, in which was a training program for people who are moving into developing SIRT capabilities. So the OAS wants to harmonize their anti-cybercrime activities, and they're increasingly calling on Caribbean organizations, Caribbean governments, to participate in a whole collaborative network of looking out for attacks, responding to attacks in a coordinated way. If something hits St. Martin, they want that reported as soon as possible into their response systems. Or sometimes, a lot of times, they will actually notice the attack against St. Martin or against certain services and so on in St. Martin and reach out here. Now, when they reach out, they want to be able to talk to a SIRT. Want to be able to talk to CSIRT members who they can coordinate a response with. So this is a part of the ongoing dialogue inside the Caribbean region for the development of CSIRTs. The interesting thing is, because this is being driven by the US and because it's largely for them to ensure security for their systems, anti-terrorism and so on, they're not necessarily pushing, there's not necessarily a push for a Caribbean-wide CSIRT or Caribbean-wide incident response systems. They have no problem speaking to Jamaica, speaking to Trinidad, speaking to Antigua, speaking to Belize, speaking to St. Martin individually, so long as each of these nations is willing to coordinate and collaborate and report up with them, which is not necessarily a bad thing. They're just being expedient. Just as easily, however, if we had regional cooperation, the problem with that is that Trinidad wouldn't necessarily talk to Jamaica, and St. Martin wouldn't necessarily talk to Belize if there were incidents afoot, even though everyone would speak to the US. What we're seeing possible is if we're increasingly moving into this space, if we're increasingly going to